subcommittee I chair moved forward legislation that addresses head-on the challenges facing the United States Postal Service. It made a number of difficult decisions, requiring the Postal Service to implement major reforms while giving the Postal Service leadership greater flexibility to operate like a business, the way it was originally intended to operate when it was created out of the old Post Office Department. Today's full committee business meeting moves this legislation another step forward. Today I am offering an amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2309, the Postal Reform Act. This legislation will create a receivership entity mandated to align Postal Service revenues and expenses, extend a collateralized debt line to USPS that will ensure the mail continues to be delivered while reforms are being implemented, right-size and modernize the postal workforce and the physical infrastructure of post offices and processing facilities, and it will eliminate the number of unfunded mandates on USPS, including the requirement that it maintain a 6-day mail delivery. Since the start of the 112th Congress, members of this committee have been intently focused on finding a way to save the Postal Service. I have been personally encouraged by the number of stakeholders working toward the goal of ensuring a sustainable United States Postal Service. As the volume of first-class mail continues to decline and the product mix offered by the Postal Service continues to shift, the United States Postal Service must find ways to return to profitability by cutting costs and operating more like a private business. Over these many months, we have also heard from union officials and their allies who have consistently claimed that the Postal Service is owed $75 billion because of overpayments into the CSRS retirement funds. We know this to be false. Today, the GAO will issue a report explicitly recognizing that no overpayment exists. To be clear, the payment methodology used for the last 40 years is consistent with congressional intent. There is no overpayment. There is no error. There is no money owed to the Postal Service. Republicans in the House have consistently opposed any taxpayer bailout of the Postal Service. Short-term fixes that rely on taxpayer-funded bailouts will not save the Postal Service. Today's GAO report confirms, once and for all, the only way out of the U.S. Postal Service's current difficulty is to vastly restructure its operations, reducing the organization's workforce and labor costs, and provide it the tools necessary to compete in the 21st century. We can no longer afford to postpone the Postal Service's day of reckoning by putting our collective heads in the sand and wishing away the problem. Doing so will only make a taxpayer bailout inevitable. Members here today are faced with a stark choice. Are we willing to make the hard decisions necessary to save the Postal Service, or will we let it crumble on our watch and potentially put this venerable institution at risk along with the jobs of the 8 million Americans who work in the mailing industry? While I wish this bill was not necessary, the status quo for the Postal Service is no longer sustainable, and the reforms in this bill are urgently needed if we are to preserve this valuable American institution. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.